started then. Is the court reporter ready? Is Marty there?
Always.
Always, I forgot. I fell for that completely. Good afternoon, everyone. This meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2015, and the time is 3:07 p.m. If everyone would please rise, I'd like to ask Vice Chair Freeman to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. And if we could go ahead with roll call. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Callan.
Present.
Commissioner McNulty.
Here. On the phone.
Commissioner Sturts.
Here.
We have a quorum. Other participants in today's meeting include our Executive Director, Ray Bladine, and Deputy Executive Director, Christina Gomez. I think other staff in the room include Anna Garcia and Lisa Schmelling, and I think Buck Forst is helping from a technical standpoint. And of course our trustee, court reporter, Marty Herder. We have legal counsel in the room, Mary O'Grady and Kristen Wintberg from Osborne Maladon, Joe Canfield from Ballard Spar, and on the phone we have Andrew Dreschler from our mapping consultant, Strategic Telemetry, and I believe Willie Desmond is also in the room. Is that accurate?
Correct.
From Strategic Telemetry. So I think that's the full complement of folks. Is that, and did I miss anyone?
Nope.
Great. So with that, we can go to the second item on the agenda, a legal briefing, discussion, and possible action relating to pending litigation in Leach versus Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, including discussion and possible action regarding retaining U.S. Supreme Court specialists for the pending Supreme Court appeals in Harris versus Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. The Commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for the purpose of obtaining legal advice and providing direction to counsel. So before I turn it over to Mary and Joe, I'd just like to acknowledge the recent decision in the Supreme Court in the case Arizona Legislature versus the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. And I'd like to thank our legal counsel, Mary O'Grady and Joe Canfield, and everyone who helped them on their staff for the briefing and work that they did in that case, and then also to Seth Waxman, whom the Commission retained on a pro bono basis to represent it at the Supreme Court in March at oral argument, and his team at Wilmer Hale. They did a superb job, and I, for one, am very grateful. So with that, I'll turn it over, unless another commissioner would like to say anything, I'll turn it over to Mary or Joe for the legal briefing.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll briefly give an overview of Leach and then turn it over to Joe and any further comments in executive session. In Leach, again, this is the state court challenge to the congressional maps that's based on various theories under the state constitution that was stayed after the Supreme Court accepted review in the legislature versus AIRC. The stay was lifted by the Superior Court the day the decision was issued by the Supreme Court in the legislature's lawsuit. And so we have been ordered to file a joint report and a proposed schedule with the court on August 3rd. There are new counsel involved Lisa Hauser, who was counsel for the plaintiffs, or co-counsel for the plaintiffs, has withdrawn, and we now have Josh Carden has joined the plaintiffs' team as legal counsel. Josh was one of the lawyers for the legislature in the legislature versus IRC case. And Mike Liberty, from formerly with Snell and Wilmer, had also been one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs. Snell and Wilmer remains on the case, but since Mike is now legal counsel for Governor Ducey, Brett Johnson from Snell and Wilmer is now involved at Snell for the plaintiffs. We also have a new judge. We were before Judge Brain, and now we're before Judge Broadman. And so there are lots of changes at this point. And anything further, I'll reserve for executive session, but that's essentially the procedural status of the case.
Thanks, Mary. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Mary, if you could, when we continue this, it's extremely difficult to hear you. You're echoing tremendously. So if you can do the best you can, it's very difficult to discern your comments, so I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, this is Joe. Commissioner Sturts, is it the same issue for me too?
And you're both echoing a lot.
Rick, could you try to turn down the volume on your speakerphone and see if that helps? Buck's turning us down here too.
I'm not on speakerphone.
Okay, so you can't turn your volume down, huh?
Just my personal volume.
Which is full and robust. Okay, we'll try again. Buck tried to do some fine tuning.
So Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'll give you a quick briefing on the Harris case. As you might recall, this is the federal court challenge to the legislative map. We had a trial back in 2012, I believe. Hope I got that right. Losing track of time. The three-judge panel ruled in favor of the commission, 2013, ruled in favor of the commission, and there was a direct appeal as a matter of right to the United States Supreme Court. The court did not act on that case until after it decided the legislature's case. So on June 30th, the day after we received the opinion in the legislature's case, the court noted what we call probable jurisdiction in our case, meaning the court has elevated it to a full hearing. There'll be an oral argument this fall. And of the three issues raised by the challengers in the Harris case, the court decided to hear two of those arguments, and one has to do with the one person, one vote challenge, which alleges that the overpopulated districts favor Republicans, and that was done for improper partisan gain, and so that's the first issue the court will deal with. And then the second issue has to do with the underpopulated districts or opportunity districts that the commission created in order to satisfy Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. They claim that, the challengers claim that that was done in an unconstitutional way, and that the case that was decided by the United States Supreme Court in the interim, the Shelby County case, which held the coverage formula for Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act to be unconstitutional, and therefore the argument is that the justification for underpopulating the minority opportunity districts was no longer valid, given that the Section 5 is inapplicable to Arizona at this time until Congress takes action. So those are the two issues that will be decided, we think will be decided by the court, and we would like to advise you going forward on the legal team and any other issues that may come up between now and argument. And we think that it would be appropriate to advise you in executive session, so that would be our recommendation at this time.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions or comments from other commissioners in public session? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? So moved. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Callan, second.
Okay. All in favor?
Are we going to have discussion, Madam Chair?
Sure, we can have discussion.
Then,
Any discussion?
yes, Madam Chair, it's Scott Freeman.
Yep, Mr. Freeman.
Before we vote on going into executive session, I would just like to ask, because part of what we would be doing, according to our agenda in executive session, is considering and deliberating who the commission should retain as Supreme Court counsel in the Harris matter. And I'd just like to know, before we go and do that, whether there is anyone on the commission, any commissioner, that has any contacts or relationship, either personal or professional or even familial or any other contact with any of the candidates to be Supreme Court counsel that they would want to disclose, such that in case those contacts might at least create the appearance of a potential conflict of interest, such that that commissioner should recuse themselves from further deliberations on the retention of counsel. And I guess while I'm at it, I guess I'd also ask whether any commissioner has had any contacts with more than one other commissioner about the retention of Supreme Court counsel, and whether any discussions have occurred outside of public hearing in that regard.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the commission.
Mr. Canfield?
Yeah, the Commissioner Freeman, his questions should be addressed. The only issue that I want to raise is just in terms of consideration of other counsel. We thought it made most sense to do that in executive session because there's a number of attorneys and firms that are going to be discussed, and not all of them are going to be selected, if any at all. And so we thought maybe that discussion might make sense to have an executive session. So in terms of the questions you're asking and disclosures, our advice would be to do that in executive session also.
Madam Chair, it's Scott Freeman.
Go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
I would agree. I would certainly not call for anyone to reveal the name of counsel, but perhaps there's a way to address that concern in public session without revealing the identity of any of the candidates.
And perhaps we can give legal advice on that inquiry in executive session, if it's appropriate.
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturt?
for me, this is easy. Under full disclosure, which is part of what we've hoped to do with our public, is to let the public know that we don't have any conflicts of interest. I have no relationships. I have no history and have made no communications in regards to this matter other than the briefing that I received from Joe Canfield earlier today. So from this commissioner's point of view, I've got no conflicts with any of the potential candidates for legal counsel that would be considered in executive session.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Sturts. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Callan.
Go ahead, Commissioner Callan.
Likewise, I would have no previous relationship with any of the candidates. It makes it easy enough to disclose that, with the exception, of course, of we have Seth Waxman, who moved to the Supreme Court for my admission to the U.S. Supreme Court. Other than that, there's been also no discussions with any other members of the commission, with exception of a brief discussion with legal counsel Mary O'Grady this morning.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, again, we probably would urge you to refrain from discussing specific counsel, just so we can have a candid discussion about that in executive session. It also, even communications with counsel, would all fall under the scope of attorney-client privilege, so those don't necessarily need to be disclosed either.
Okay.
Madam Chair, it's Scott Freeman.
Go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
Likewise with Commissioner Callum, I have no known relationship with any of the candidates for Supreme Court counsel.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think this is Linda. I'm the only one who hasn't spoken. I don't have any relationships with any of them. I've had no discussion with any of the commissioners.
Okay, and now I think I'm the last one, actually. I do know one of the candidates that contacted Mary and Joe to be a Supreme Court specialist in this matter, and they did last time as well, which I think the whole commission knows about, and that's John Elwood. And other than that, though, I have no conflict of interest with him or with anyone else, and I didn't discuss this with any other commissioners. So with that, is there further discussion, or can we now proceed to go into executive session? To vote, at least.
I don't have any further discussion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay. Nay.
Okay, we had 4 ayes, I believe, and Mr. Sturt's a nay. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so it's now 3:24 in the afternoon, and we'll go ahead and exit out of public session. And then I'm not sure how many members of the public are there, but Ray, you can let us know when it's clear.
Okay. We're on and recording, so we can start. Microphones, now we need to use them. This one's on. Yeah. Madam Chair, we're ready to start when you are.
Okay, great. Let me just get the time. Okay, we'll enter back into public session. The time is now 4:30 p.m. Would anyone like to start with what our discussions were in executive session?
Madam Chair, I think what we need is a motion on the floor.
Okay, I didn't know if Joe or Mary wanted to make any preamble type comments. So,
Okay.
is there a motion coming from any of the commissioners about discussions that we had in executive session?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Joe, can I interject here before any motions are made?
Sure, Joe.
So, Madam Chair, members of the commission, council, Mary O'Grady and I have a recommendation for the commission with respect to the legal team going forward in the Harris case at the United States Supreme Court. And our recommendation is that the commission engage the services of the Jenner and Block law firm in Washington, D.C., led by counsel Paul Smith and his team, to serve as lead counsel in this matter, to work with my team at Ballard Spahr and Mary's team at Osborne Maladon. And they have offered to do this on a pro bono basis. They are an excellent firm with extensive experience in the United States Supreme Court, and election litigation, and redistricting in particular. They have worked on matters in multiple states involving redistricting, including Texas, Florida, New Jersey, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And having spoken with them about this case, we are convinced that they would provide excellent representation to the council, given the issues that are going to be decided by the Supreme Court, and we would be thrilled to work with them. So with that having been said, that is our recommendation.
Thank you, Joe.
So, Madam Chair, I would move that we proceed in accordance with the recommendation of council.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Sounds like there were 5 ayes. So I think Mary and Joe can proceed with contacting Jenner and Block and look forward to their representation of the commission.
Madam Chair, it's Scott Freeman.
Freeman.
I just wanted to explain my vote. With the retention of Supreme Court counsel in the legislature's action, I voted no, but explain my vote. In explaining my vote, I said it wasn't that Mr. Waxman's price wasn't right. It wasn't that he was qualified. It wasn't that the commission didn't deserve competent, if not the best, counsel available. I would have done that here as well with the same provisos, but not knowing whether there would be 3 votes to retain the Jenner Block firm, I voted yes to spare everyone the drama and the trouble. And I'd like to add that I'm kind of disappointed, but perhaps not surprised, that one of the commissioners participated in deliberations on the retention of Supreme Court counsel, despite the fact that the commissioner had a relationship with one of the lawyers being considered. That may not be a true pecuniary conflict of interest under state law, but certainly under the provision of the Arizona Constitution that established this commission, commissioners are supposed to conduct themselves in ways that build confidence in the redistricting process and be open and honest and make full disclosures. And perhaps it violated the spirit of that constitutional provision.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Comments from other commissioners?
I guess I'll just add that I think we all, disclosed before we went into an executive session, or am I remembering that wrong? I think we made our disclosures. That's all I've got.
Any comments from other commissioners? More from legal counsel? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move on to agenda item 3 unless there's anything else on 2 that needs to be said. Okay, number 3, Executive Director's Report. I assume that's Ray Bladine, but it could be Christina Gomez.
You're right, it's Christina Gomez because she's much smarter
Okay.
than I am.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commission members, I'd just like to briefly go over this Executive Director's report, specifically focusing on the Excel spreadsheets and the website. First of all, you've all received the attachments from Lisa Schmeling on Friday. The first spreadsheet is the Commissioner report, which is in all white with a little bit of yellow shading on the left-hand side. This is the monthly report that is submitted to you each month at the beginning of the month. All of our actuals for FY15 are shown on this spreadsheet, except for roughly $37,000, which are last-minute invoices that came in after June 30th. So next month you will see those expenditures reflected on the report. The next spreadsheet is Exhibit 3, which is the multicolor spreadsheet. And this report is submitted to JLBC and the budget and the governor's budgeting office each month. The difference between the first Excel spreadsheet and this one are legal services. The commissioner report breaks it down by vendor, and the Exhibit 3 spreadsheet, the multicolor spreadsheet, breaks it down by legal case. Next is the projection spreadsheet, which is labeled FY16 on the very top. These are our best estimates for fiscal year 16. So we actually got these numbers from this past fiscal year. So this is our best estimate for personnel services, travel, other operating expenses. We have roughly 1.8 million or 1.8 for professional and outside services for this current fiscal year. So our fiscal year appropriation combined total with FY16 standard appropriation and with the FY14 supplemental appropriation is roughly $2.2 million. The next item I'd like to discuss is the website. So we've come across a couple of issues with, regarding the website. It was brought to our attention that one of the videos has been corrupted on the website. It's the June 30th, 2011 meeting, and also when we went through the rest of the meetings, it's also the July 21st meeting from 2011. In the memo dated, I believe it's July 21st, Buck went through a series of steps to try to fix the problem. However, we weren't able to. The next item are the KMZ files. Once again, we notice that the KMZ files are actually the files on the website that allows the user to zoom in and to actually look at street level boundaries. So street names, numbers, and boundary lines. We noticed that since the office staff uses the KMZ file on a regular basis to help answer questions that come in, we noticed that the website was just showing a map of the state and not the actual maps. So I asked Buck to work with Willie, and they are working to restore the KMZ files at this time. So that's kind of been a very long process, but they're working through that right now. The third point too, just as a backup, I've asked Willie and Buck if they can go ahead and under the citizens submission link, if they can go ahead and upload the shape files, so that if somebody who has mapping software, if they would like to go ahead and download those files and look at the citizens submissions, they would have the ability to access those files using a mapping software. So they are working on that as well. So with that, does anyone have any other questions?
Madam Chair, Scott Freeman.
Go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
With respect to the website and the commission hearings that have been lost, I assume the transcript we still have, correct?
Yes, sir.
And but the video, and I think that was the video of the hearing at the Pima County Community College, and then there was the South Mountain Community College. Those were right after, I think, the retention of the mapping consultant, and I remember them very well. It was figuratively speaking, a pitchfork and torches affair with lots of public displeasure being expressed. Were those just saved on the same part of the disk that got corrupted, or it was just random chance that those were corrupted? Any ideas?
I can ask Buck to talk to this more, but my understanding is that since they were posted online and public has access to it, it's easy to get a file corrupted, relatively easy. Our problem was we didn't realize that at the front end and hadn't backed up all of them in another place. So frankly, it's kind of now that the horse is out of the barn, we've backed them all up. I can't tell you, we don't have any knowledge as to why those 2 meetings. Buck tried to get them out of GoDaddy, whose server had them on it, but they didn't keep a backup. Buck tried to get it off the state server. They didn't have a backup. Staff here went through all of our individual computers, seeing if we had copies of it, and we didn't. So my understanding is the problem is if you have those things online, they can be corrupted. Now we're going to continue, of course, to have them online, but we do have backup files. And yes, we do have all of the transcripts, so we have met the open meeting law requirements, public records law.
So going forward, I mean, that's kind of surprising that we'd post something on somebody else's server and not keep a copy. But going forward, we're keeping our own copies of our own videos, our own transcripts, our own KMZ files, and other map shape files and whatnot. We'll keep them on a flash drive or a hard drive and ourselves.
That's correct. That's correct. I think we perhaps thought they would be on the state server, but they were not. And I know the state went through some changes on their servers. But I think Buck has them on a flash drive, and if I'm wrong, or flash drives, he can come in and correct that. He's in the next room.
Yes, I find that also really disturbing that we didn't have, copies of those meetings. And I guess I'm not sure which ones are missing. June 30th, that was a very famous meeting. And then what was the other one?
Madam Chair, that would be July 21st, 2011.
Okay, so there's 2 total that are missing. And has Buck asked GoDaddy if there's any way of recovering those 2 meetings? Or
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask him to step in, but he has told me yes, he has. But I think he can answer it better than I.
okay.
We've got the transcripts, though, right?
Yes, we do.
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Buck. I did contact
Hi, Buck.
GoDaddy, and they only keep 30 days worth of backups, so they didn't have anything there. And they said it was going to be, do you remember how much I said it was going to be to try to do a restore, a backup? It was pretty expensive for them to do that as well.
Well, I hope that if any members of the public are actually listening or reading this later and happen to have copied some of our meetings and they have those 2 dates, it would be really useful to get those back.
I know I enjoy reliving them whenever I can. But Madam Chair, if I could ask a question about budget, to shift gears a little bit. And this might involve council as well in terms of, you've kind of given us a sketch of what we can project and leach in terms of timing and discovery cutoff, and it'll be, if it proceeds like typical litigation, a lot of work through the end of the year. In terms of what we would project on Harris in terms of workload for you all and additional expenses involved in supporting Supreme Court counsel, when do we think the briefs will, or we perhaps know when the briefs will be due, and then when are we sort of guessing when argument might take place?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, the briefing in the Harris case will take place over the fall. According to my notes, the petitioner in Harris will have until September 14th to file their brief. September 4th, I'm sorry, September 4th, and then we will have until October 26th to file our brief, and then there'll be a reply brief filed mid-November, and it looks like there'll be argument possibly scheduled as early as December, although we don't know for sure at the U.S. Supreme Court. So to answer your question, the bulk of the legal work will be done here in the next few months.
Do you think that briefing schedule will hold, or is it pretty typical to have a 2-week extension or something on those?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, we're pretty confident this is going to be the briefing schedule because we've already agreed to one extension by the other side and vice versa. So.
And the schedule that Joe mentioned is with the extension request subject to court approval.
Okay. Ms. Gomez or Mr. Bladine, anything else from your end on this agenda item?
Madam Chair, I don't believe so unless there, again, is other questions. And I do want to say that your comment about if anybody has copies of those meetings, let us know, because we don't want to disappoint Vice Chair Freeman to being able to look at it. And I do want to let you know, I really feel bad that that happened. I don't think anyone here, I know we didn't, had an idea that it could. And we are still, and we have tried other outside groups to see if they might have had it on their website. So far, we have not found that, but we will continue to look, and if we can find it, we of course will get it reposted. And I think with that, that's all I have to say.
Any other questions for Mr. Bladine or Ms. Gomez? Okay, hearing none. Thank you both for all the preparation and the spreadsheets and everything you've sent out to us in advance and keeping us apprised on the financial end of things. Let's look at the next item. Is public comment. Are there any members of the public at Evans House?
I don't know, there is not. There was one person, but he left, and so there's no one to public comment.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we can adjourn. The time is 7:48 p.m. I'm sorry, 4:48. I'm traveling. 4:48 p.m. and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.